All right, people, welcome to the Stay in the Fight podcast. With me today, I got my former co-host of the All You See and Hear podcast, Jeff Endy. He is the special teams coordinator, receiver coach, recruiting coordinator, man of many hats at Ursinus College. And just for you people that didn't listen to episode one, go listen to episode one. But a little bit of background about this podcast. When quarantine hit, I had an interview for player personnel job at the FBS level, and like long story short, I didn't get it. But I made it my mission to try to find out, what I didn't know about the Division One level, and end up having like a bunch of interviews with all these different people. And I'm talking to guys who are 25, 27 with full-time FBS gigs, and I'm like thinking to myself, okay, like whose uncle do you know, or like how did you get that job? Kind of jealous, to be honest with you. But then you hear these wonderful stories, and they're like, they were living on their friend's couch, working for nothing for 2 years, and they really made a lot of sacrifices to get to where they are. And it just kind of inspired me to, I want to go tell the story of all these amazing coaches. So Coach Endy is a good friend of mine. We work together. And today, hopefully, we can tell you guys his story, because he definitely had a different path. And I'm excited to hear from you. So,
What's up,
Coach,
man? Thanks for having me.
absolutely. So just getting right into it, I know you were quarterback at Pottstown in Pennsylvania, ended up going to Ursinus College right outside Philadelphia, which is where you work now as a DB. When did you know you wanted to be a football coach?
Yeah, so really, always played football. My family's big in football. Always wanted to grow up being like an architect or an engineer. Math was really my thing, and it wasn't until my senior year in high school I broke my collarbone the second week of the season, and kind of really just taking the step back from playing, and helping out my backup now. My senior year, he's a young sophomore quarterback. Kind of talking through the coach about just kind of taking that step back and seeing football different from the player's eyes, and seeing it from a coach's eyes on the sideline, or in the game planning. It really just kind of sparked that interest for me. So I really left high school knowing that's what I wanted to do. And it was a big reason that I chose Ursinus then too, because they had a coaching minor. I talked to Coach Gallagher, who's our head coach, through the recruiting process, and he really just spoke about his network, and where he, I'm sure it's going to be a big thing as this podcast goes on, is all about network. So just kind of tying myself to Coach G, and really just going to a spot where I thought I could learn a lot more football, which, you brought up, I played quarterback. When I got recruited, they really wanted me to play defensive back. So, something where, I maybe had 5 tackles in my career, wasn't a great cover guy when I got to college, but making that switch just kind of opened up my eyes to a whole different side of football, learning the defensive side of things, and, never knowing what a technique was for a defensive lineman, to kind of knowing the whole defensive scheme, by my sophomore year, was something I really took a lot of pride in, was kind of learning that side of the ball too. And really just kind of took me through the next couple steps of my career. So it was a lot of fun to kind of learn that way.
So was it one of those things where like your coaches knew that you were going to be a coach one day?
I think so. I think my head coach kind of knew it, and he's been a really Brett Myers, who is a pretty successful coach in Pennsylvania. Went to like the last 3 state titles out in Middletown. Is a great mentor for me. Is always someone that I'll text, kind of immediately. And I think early on he kind of started picking my brain to make me think a little bit differently. As a young high school kid, I was going to the high school to, and he was quizzing me about different coverages and plays that would work against those coverages. So just making me think differently as a football player. And early on, once I got hurt, and then I was able to come back and play, thankfully, after that season, I was like, I can't stop football, whether it was playing or coaching. I just had to be tied into the game. And I think he knew that just from my personality and us, talking through those years. It was a really special bond with me and Coach Myers, and really just kind of catapulted me through the next couple of years.
Absolutely. All right. So bring me back. So what were your first steps, and like how did you first break into the profession?
Yeah, so once I graduated from Ursinus, I still had to do a semester of student teaching. So I was technically graduated. I had my degree, but to be a certified teacher, I needed to be I needed that to do that semester of student teaching. So I wasn't quite done yet. Um, and Shane Eaches, who was the defensive coordinator at Ursinus, you were working for him at the time. He called me in like July or June. It was pretty late in the summer. Just asking if I would be willing to come out and help. And he knew I had to do student teaching. I was close. I was student teaching at Pottsgrove High School at the time, so it was like a mile away from my parents' house. So it was really something where I could go teach, get to Ursinus by 3 o'clock, 3:30, do the meetings, practice, and then go back and watch film with you guys afterwards. So that was kind of really the first step. And when I tell you those were some long days, those were probably the longest days just because I had something other to do than coaching. When you're
Mm-hmm.
just coaching for, those 12-hour days, that's, cool. But, waking up at 7 to, being at the school at 7 o'clock, going through a whole full lesson or day of lessons and teaching, um, running down 422 to get to practice on time and practicing. And then we watch film till, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, or, we're game planning for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Those were long days. And then grading papers and doing all that stuff, and then still studying to practice or to take my practice exam. Those were long days. So I'm really grateful for those times because learned even more then, when you actually get into the true game planning of things. And, I think you probably remember better than me, just a young kid. And I just came in with ideas. And the one thing I was really appreciative was you or Shane never really just told me to shut up or just like sit back and listen. Like my ideas, I felt like they mattered in that setting. Um, and I don't know if that's true for a lot of young coaches when they get in. And I think really
Mm-hmm.
the next step of my career really took me back because I had a say with you and Shane. And then, the next step, it kind of, you had to work your way through those steps to earn that. And I think I earned my trust with Shane playing for him, and he kind of knew what I knew in our
Mm-hmm.
defense. But yeah, so that was definitely a lot of fun. We didn't have the best year. I think we were 3-7 or whatnot, but um, it was definitely different because obviously I was coaching guys that I played with. So that's kind of a whole different
Yeah.
realm of things.
Could you elaborate on that? Like, how difficult is that? Where like, these are guys that you're spending time on Saturday night with. Now all of a sudden, it's you're in an authority position. What is that like?
Absolutely. So I think the big thing is I was told early on, just be yourself in coaching. And I kind of saw from your first episode, like you were just the authoritarian type because your coaches were like that. So, my one thing was just to be me, coach, help out where I could. And I think it really took the players to be more mature than what they were. And my best friend roommate was the guy I was coaching in my position group. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, was I coaching him? No, Shane was coaching him. I was kind of coaching the younger guys. And it was really for the other guys, the older guys who obviously knew I was, what I was doing at school, and we were hanging out Saturday nights. They had to be more mature just because of that relationship. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my buddies early on, like, was kind of talking trash to me like we were friends, and we are friends. We're still friends to this day, talk to him all the time. But one of the other coaches heard about that and kind of like flipped on him. And it was really early in camp. So once that happened, it really wasn't an issue. But yeah, it's definitely weird. And, if you are in that situation where you're coaching your buddies, coach them. You don't have to be the guy who's, mother effing them. You could just, help when you see, love them up when you see that they do good, and have fun doing it for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And I have in my career been around coaches that graduated and started coaching, or recently graduated, and they're working with guys that um, they played with. And I think the most important thing, like you said, is obviously a level of maturity from the players, but also for yourself. Like, there's definitely a level of restraint to, like, all right, I'm in this position of power. Like, I'm not going to go back to the dorm after practice on Friday or something like that, and like hold yourself to that level of esteem. And I thought you did a really good job with that.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, my girlfriend was still at school at the time too. She was a
Mm.
junior at her sinus, and um, you know, us just seeing each other in the parking lot after practices. We did that for, the whole season, and, unless that was probably the toughest thing was,
Mm.
just not being able to, and even my friends were still playing, I couldn't, it was tough, but I was glad to get through it. And I learned a lot that season for sure.
Absolutely. All right. So recap the rest of your career for me. Where did you go? How much did you make? How much was rent? Like, how did you survive?
Yeah. So right after that season, I continued to
Well,
substitute
first,
teach.
did you get paid at Ursinus that year?
I did not. So I was a
Okay.
volunteer at Ursinus while student teaching, which was obviously a free job too. So kind of working two jobs for free. I'm really lucky that my parents have been very supportive during this whole time. And um, so right after the season with Ursinus, I continued to substitute teach for my high school. So I went back to Pottstown and was a long-term sub there, and actually was making pretty solid money. Um, and I was always told, one thing Coach Myers told me early on is that if I do ever end up taking the coaching job or the teaching job, my coaching college career is probably going to be over, just because it's too hard to say no to the money.
Mm.
So I was making solid money. The high school offered me a job to stay, and I just couldn't do it because I knew it would be the end, because I'd end up probably coaching high school, which is fine. It all depends on the journey you want to take. And I just wasn't ready to say no to college football yet. So I really started to apply to every job on the football scoop. Heard back from maybe 2 out of like 50, which was pretty crazy. It's kind of demoralizing when you just want that chance, and you just don't even hear back for a lot of them. Everyone's applying to those jobs, so it makes a lot of sense. But it wasn't until King's College called me. Coach Snar called me on the phone one day. Um, we talked for a little bit. He knew Coach Gallagher. He was a Muhlenberg coach back in the day, so they coached against each other a bunch, and offered me to come up on an interview. And I felt like I did really good. I prepared. Preparing for an interview is probably the biggest thing that you can do, and thinking about the questions that they could have, because later on I went on a different interview and I wasn't prepared for the questions I had, and just completely sunk the interview by not being prepared to answer it. But going into the Kings interview, I felt really good. I felt comfortable, getting up on the board and talking about, what we did at Ursinus' defense, and, just being really real. And so I took that job. I ended up getting it. It was an intern position. So it was $3,000 with full housing and meals. So it was about $150 a check every 2 weeks, which is pretty crazy. But the really nice thing was rent was free. I was living right on campus. I got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I was probably eating, the best I had in a couple years, and definitely in the years previous or following. So I was eating good, really short commute to campus, which was really nice. But kind of went back into, when I got there, it was about 2 weeks before camp. So I didn't really have a lot of time to learn the defense. I was the defensive backs assistant coach. And how I look at it, I was really kind of the secretary of the defense. I was
Mm.
making up the scout cards. I was typing up the script, typing up the practice plans, and really just facilitating for the defense. It was almost quality control type of stuff. And I was in charge of the camera girls and making sure the filming was getting done. And if we didn't have batteries, I had to run up and charge them or do all that kind of stuff. So I would say that first year there, I didn't do as much coaching as I thought I would do, but I worked really hard at it, and I tried to be the best quality control, print out the best cards, make sure everything was prepared. And, so because of how well I did that first year, they gave me a little bit more responsibility into the second year, and actually let me coach the corners as a position group, which I was really thankful for. Um, so that first year was different, because of not making any money, just kind of, I didn't buy food. I
Mm-hmm.
had the cafeteria. So every meal was really at the cafeteria. I didn't go out to eat. When we went to the bars, luckily the older coaches would take us interns out and kind of, you buy us a pitcher, so we didn't have to worry about spending money, which I was really grateful for, because I was away from my family for the first time. Living in a different part of Pennsylvania, it was different. So I was really grateful to have some older coaches kind of take us under our wing there. Um, And then moving into the second season there, I got what you could call a promotion to a restricted earnings job, which ended up making $9,000 for 10 months. And the really tough part about that was you only got paid while the school was in session. So you got paid from like September to early December, and then you didn't get paid again until I think late January or February. So that was definitely different. And with that pay raise, then we also had to go get our own house, and we were off the meal plan too. So me and two other coaches found this house about 20 minutes away from Kings's campus, not in the best of neighborhoods, and our rent was $680 for the month, which
For the
was
whole
crazy
place?
for the whole place. We're talking about a two-floor house, 3 bedrooms. So me, the two coaches, and the one coach's fiance moved into this place. So we were paying $170 a month each for the rent, and then utilities and whatnot, which all in we were probably like little over $200. So it was crazy cheap. With crazy cheap obviously came the area that we were living in, kind of a sketchy neighborhood. We killed a ton of mice once it got cold in the winter. So definitely living differently. I didn't have a bed at the time, so I bought an air mattress, was sleeping on an air mattress until I could get a bed up to the house. So
Maybe that's why your back's so messed up.
absolutely. It was definitely different living. Trying to make a box of pasta, go as long as it can. Um, from working together, I can eat SpaghettiOs and tuna fish packets for lunch, just trying to find the cheapest deals at the grocery store just to try and make it through the week and make sure that you stay well fed and whatnot. But living in that house was a lot of fun with the two coaches that I definitely would call some of my best friends in the coaching world. But it was definitely different living. So luckily, I only lived in that house for about 6 months. And when we got to the coaching convention, I guess it was 2018. One thing I always did was try and hit you up or hit Shane up and see what you guys were doing that first night out. So I was lucky enough to run into you guys and met with Coach Gallagher and kind of just started talking. And at the time he said that there might be a job opening up at Ursinus, which was kind of like always kind of the dream, right? Come back down to Ursinus where my family kind of is, 20 minutes away. My girlfriend was working in Philly. So it was almost too good to be true that this job could be opening up, right in the winter when I really didn't want to live in that house anymore. I was tired of killing mice and, just being away from my girlfriend at the time was probably the toughest thing. We only saw each other, once or twice a month. So, really the opportunity, which, we obviously were out at night in Charlotte, didn't know how much truth was actually in this job opening up. So, a week goes by, I'm back at Kings and I'm recruiting for Kings, and Coach Gallagher then calls me and we talked a little bit more. And I was like, wow, this thing is actually maybe going to happen. So I went and told Coach Nar, like, hey, this job could open up. It's going to be, a little bit more money. Housing is going to be included. Just different benefits from what I didn't have at that time at the job in Kings. And for guys that, if you are looking for the next job, I would always say, tell the head coach, tell the guys that you're working for, just because, they could always help you. They might make a call for you or, whatever it might be. So Coach Nar was very supportive of me, going forward with this job. So the weird thing was I got a call Sunday by Coach G, like, hey, like, we need you to come pretty much ASAP. Can you be here Monday? So, I get off the phone, I call Coach Nar, I'm like, hey, I'm going to take this job, but they need me there Monday, which was, kind of screwed up to them. I was leaving them kind of high and dry in the middle of the biggest recruiting season, or part of the recruiting time where they're scheduling visits and whatnot. But, I gave them everything that they needed to keep going with my recruits. And I packed up my stuff, not even all my stuff. I packed up pretty much clothes and moved back home to my parents and was at the office for Ursinus, I think, on Tuesday. And really just started the job there. So that was kind of a whirlwind of how I got back to Ursinus.
Awesome. Do you have any good stories from like when you were just like broke and making no money?
It was So when I was at Kings, there was like 9 other coaches. We actually had a pretty big staff for a Division III. There was like 9 guys in the office all the time, and a couple of the guys always wanted to go to this um, King buffet, um, your Chinese buffet restaurant, and they were like, "Oh, let's go there after practice." It was right next to the field, so it was pretty convenient. And just being kind of frugal at the time, not spending any money, my tagline became maybe next pay period, maybe next pay period. So that was kind of, you know, and every once in a while, I'd be like, "All right, let's go," and it was like $10. It was something where
Yeah.
you're looking back, I probably could have went, and it wouldn't have broke the bank, but you know, just next pay period, maybe we'll go then. So that kind of became the running joke um, of just not making any money. And, you kind of have to change the way you're thinking. You have friends who are working, corporate jobs or doing whatever, and they're making solid money. And you can see, they're living in the city and going out to the bars every weekend. And, when I was going out to the bars, I was still looking for, the $1.25 special or whatever it was. So, that was probably from making no money, that was pretty tough. When we did move into that house and uh, that second year at Kings, the toilet ran. We owed about $300 in water bill for the first time.
Mm.
And when I say that almost broke the bank, you just kind of see the savings dwindle. And at the time, I was really living off the savings that I made substitute teaching, which was 2 years ago now. So just watching my savings where it was that solid, and then it just every month was going down. I was actually every month was in the negative after rent and food, gas, the whole deal. The paychecks just weren't surviving that, and that was a big reason to move on. So it was definitely scary, those times, and you're wondering, how can we do this, and it ends up working out. And hopefully it works out for everyone listening. But when you see the money start to really go down, it's a scary
Yeah.
thought.
Definitely becomes real.
Yeah.
So you've been at Ursinus for a couple of years now. What would you say like your break has been?
I mean, probably the biggest break would have been you moving on to Akron. Was kind of in a role at Ursinus where unless somebody moved on, I was kind of stuck.
Mm.
And had a lot of coach talks with Coach Gallagher at the time, and wanting to, I'm at the point in my life where I want to kind of start the family, do whatever it might be with that, and move in with my girlfriend, and it just wasn't feasible at the spot I was at. So, Coach Gallagher's been there a long time, and a lot of assistants have too. So it really was going to take somebody to move on for my break to happen at Ursinus. And I know, working with you, you wanted to take that next step to the next level, and you got your break and kind of inadvertently gave me my break. So now, full time special teams recruiting coordinator has been a lot of fun. It's been a crazy year to kind of be in that spot, just because recruiting's a little bit different. This fall we only practiced a little bit, so not even really able to do special teams. For the most part, it's been good just to kind of have a job in this time. That's probably been the most relaxing thing. But yeah, I would say you allowed my first break to happen for sure.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. But all right, so kind of looking back on it, now that you're a little bit more comfortable and in a better position, like, could you do it all over again?
I think so. Because I had such a great supporting staff, like I said
Mm.
earlier, my family was always great for me. Whether it was, sending up meals that second year at Kings, or just helping with like the phone bills and stuff like that. So I think if even if I didn't have this supporting staff, I would try and be as resilient as possible. There's definitely ways in this world where you can get by, and leaning on the people. There was enough people, even outside of my family, at Kings that were very supportive and would help out if coaches have moved into other coaches' houses until they found something. So definitely, just I think I could. It's hard. It's hard to say no to money, especially when you have job offers on the table that can give you that. Um, you just have to be very resilient, very persistent, and knowing what you want and who you want to be. And it was early on. I was obsessed with getting the next job, moving up the ladder and climbing. And, I had a long talk with Coach Myers that second year at Kings, and um, he made it clear that if you want to just coach football, find a way to coach football and make the dream come true. The rest will kind of sort itself out. So just kind of having faith that if I just, be where my feet are, if I can really just focus on doing my job and doing it the best of my abilities, the opportunities will come, the success will come, and all that kind of stuff. So I think having that support system, and just believing in myself I would definitely try, and I would do it all over again if I needed to.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a really, really important topic, is like having that support system in place. Now, I couldn't have done this without my family and like the friends that I've made along the way that helped me out, like obviously Chanel. Yeah, I guess everything happens for a reason. So
Definitely.
looking more to like the future, what's kind of your dream goal, and like what's like where to next?
Yeah. So I always envisioned myself being a head coach, when I was a kid, and when I really started getting the thought of being a coach, you don't think of being just a position coach. So I want to be a head football coach. I want to be the leader. I want to be, in front of the guys, doing whatever. I just like the feeling of leading. I felt like I was a pretty solid leader as a player, and the chance just to really own something and to put your stamp on a program. And so definitely wanted to be. I hope being a head coach is in my future. Alongside of that, it's how I get there. Right now, special teams recruiting coordinator. Kind of switch gears and coaching offense right now for the first time, which has been a blast. I definitely recommend young coaches, if you can take the time, or if you're early on, and can switch to another side of the ball, learn another position. It's definitely worth it. So I've had a blast coaching the wide receivers and kind of thinking in a different way. Whether that takes me to being an offense coordinator, at some point going back and being a defense coordinator. Really, my thought process from having that talk with Coach Myers back in the day was, whatever it is, if I can coach football and start moving to starting a family and raising a family, the job is just, it doesn't matter what I'm doing as long as I'm doing what I love, and what I love is coaching football. So I would say the dream was at one point is to be a head coach. Um, Being in the southeastern Pennsylvania region, just with my family, near Danielle's family, is great. Working at a school that I played for is a lot of fun, just because I feel like I've got a tie with every class that we recruit. I can kind of see a little bit of what I went through in them, and just kind of giving that experience, I think, is the greatest part of being at Ursinus. Just kind of fulfilling, just keeping that ball rolling. So I'd say really that's the dream, is just to be able to continue to coach football wherever that takes me. I'm going to just trust it and go along with the ride. But, not really being where my feet are, let the opportunities come, take the shot when it's there, and see what happens. But
That's
not
awesome,
looking too
man.
far down the road right now. Yeah.
That sounds like some offensive philosophy right there.
Yeah.
But all right, wrapping up, you have do you have any advice for a young coach that's just starting out, or maybe somebody that wants to make a jump to from high school to the college level? Any career advice?
Absolutely. I think one thing that I struggled with at first, not when I got to Kings, was it's okay to not be the smartest guy in the room. I got there and thought I knew pretty much everything there was about defense, just because of the understanding I had in our philosophy at Ursinus. And just because that's what doesn't mean there's not more to learn. And that's probably the biggest thing I've learned over the last 5 years now, is just you can always take something from every experience. So don't be afraid to learn from somebody else. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Listen to other people. Um, that was a huge thing for me. Just thinking that I knew more than other people, and I didn't. And it's just, so don't be that guy for sure. If you want to make the move, lean on the people in your corner. High school coaches talk to more college coaches in a year probably than anybody. I'm sure they've been able to build relationships. So if you can have anybody give you a call, I truly think the only reason I got the first job was because Coach Nar recognized Coach Gallagher's name on my resume. So if you don't know somebody, get to know people. I had, and as a young coach, I've had coaches bring me resumes at these, recruiting combines, and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job. If you have time, give me a call. So if you really want to grind that hard to get the job, they're out there. You just got to think a little bit differently how you're going to get it. Whether that's, emailing every coach personally, going out and meeting them at these recruiting combines, whatever you can do. If you really want to do it, there's an opportunity there. You just got to, pick up all the rocks until you find it. So those are probably the two biggest things. And then, just do the best job you can be. Be yourself. Really just focus on where you're at, doing the best job possible, and the opportunities will then come off of that. Because if you do a good job, the coaches that you're working for will tell you that you're doing a good job, and they'll tell other people too, and they'll want to hire you because of that. So just be where you are, work your tails off, and opportunities will come, hopefully.
Awesome, man. I think that's some really good advice. We're going to sign off here. Coach Endy, you want to give them your Twitter handle?
Yeah. So Coach Endy, Coach_Endy. Give me a follow. I'll follow you back, and let's talk football if you want.
All right. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it. And this is the Stay in the Fight podcast signing off.